Welcome back to Dark Untold. Tonight, the shadows stretch longer, and the silence of midnight hides more than it reveals. In 8 new most disturbing small-town horror stories at midnight, you'll step into forgotten alleys where wandering spirits linger, cursed graveyards whisper their secrets, and unseen eyes follow your every move through the darkness. These aren't just stories, they're the kind that stay with you, long after the screen fades to black. So turn off the lights, put on your headphones, and whatever you do, don't follow the voices. I was told never to follow the sound of the whistle, no matter how clear it seemed, no matter how close it felt to my ear. But curiosity has always been my downfall, and in Thurmond, West Virginia, curiosity is as dangerous as stepping onto rotten planks over the river. My name's Daniel Harper, 32 years old, a freelance photographer who thought ghost towns were safe subjects for late-night adventures. I came here to capture what was left of an old mining community boarded windows, leaning rail depots, the skeleton of an economy abandoned decades ago. What I found instead was something that never left. The locals gave me warnings, though they were half-whispered, wrapped in laughter that sounded too forced. At the diner in Fayetteville, a waitress looked at the camera around my neck and asked, "You heading to Thurmond? Don't stay past midnight." I asked why, but she only shook her head. An older man at the counter muttered, "Shadow train takes who it wants. You hear the whistle. You're already marked." He wouldn't look at me after that. I arrived in Thurmond late in the evening, parking my truck near the bridge that creaked like it might collapse beneath its own memory. The town was silent, the kind of silence that made you think the air was holding its breath. Wooden storefronts leaned into the street as though whispering to each other. A single streetlight buzzed weakly, casting a pale yellow circle that swallowed moths. I remember the smell old coal dust and damp earth, sharp enough to sting the nose. I set up my tripod near the abandoned depot. The paint was long gone, leaving the wood gray and splintered, but the sign, Thurmond, still clung to the front, its letters weathered but legible. I was chasing a photo essay about forgotten places, trying to sell nostalgia and decay to magazines. Midnight was creeping closer, but I didn't check the time. I should have. The first hint came as a vibration under my boots, so subtle I thought I imagined it. Then the sound followed low, distant, unmistakable. A train whistle, long, mournful, echoing across the mountains. I froze. I'd read that the tracks had been torn up years ago, nothing left but gravel and weeds. Yet the sound rolled through the hollow like it was gliding along steel. My pulse quickened, excitement mingling with dread. I told myself this was exactly the kind of eerie detail that would make my essay stand out. The vibration grew, rattling the tripod legs. I turned toward the sound, heart hammering as the air thickened with something metallic, sharp ozone, and rust. A black shape emerged at the far end of the overgrown trackbed. At first I thought it was smoke, but then I saw it take form. A locomotive, massive and gleaming in the moonlight, though its surfaces swallowed light instead of reflecting it. The wheels turned soundlessly, yet the grinding rumble filled my chest like thunder. I lifted the camera and snapped a picture, but the screen showed nothing, just empty track and weeds. The train was there, looming, but it refused to be captured. Its windows were hollow, dark as open graves. I tried to convince myself this was an elaborate trick of light, maybe a fog bank carrying sound in strange ways. But then the whistle shrieked again, so close it made my eardrums ache, and I felt the wind of its passing whip through my jacket. That was when I saw the conductor. He leaned out from the engine, though his body seemed blurred, stretched thin like smoke, held together by some cruel intention. His face was shrouded in shadow, but I saw the glint of his cap badge. He raised one long arm and motioned, beckoning me forward. My throat went dry. My body locked, torn between fleeing and obeying. Then I heard it, soft but certain. like words breathed against my ear. Tickets punched. The train rolled closer, yet the tracks beneath it remained broken, jagged with weeds. The wheels cut across empty air, but still sparked with ghostly fire. I stumbled backward, clutching my camera like it could protect me. The conductor's shadow stretched impossibly long, sliding over the depot wall until it brushed against me. My skin burned cold where it touched. I ran. My boots pounded the cracked pavement as I sprinted back toward the bridge, but the whistle followed, closer, louder, vibrating through my bones. The night had thickened into something suffocating, and with each breath I swore, I smelled coal smoke, bitter and choking. The bridge loomed ahead, but the boards beneath my feet groaned as if the whole thing might collapse into the black water below. Behind me, the train shrieked to a stop. The sound of brakes screaming on metal filled the hollow, though no rails existed. I couldn't help it. I looked back. The locomotive loomed at the edge of town, its bulk swallowing the street. The conductor stood on the ground now, though his legs tapered into shadow that faded before touching earth. He lifted his hand again, but this time he held something, an old brass punch, the kind used to mark tickets. With a snap, he squeezed it, and sparks fell like fireflies. My chest seized, pain lancing across my ribs. It felt like something inside me had been clipped, torn free. I stumbled to the truck, fumbling with the keys, my hands slick with sweat. The engine roared to life, and I tore across the bridge without daring to look back again. But even as I sped away, the whistle followed, fading slowly, like a farewell. That was 3 nights ago. Since then, I can't escape the sound. It follows me everywhere. In my apartment, I wake at midnight to the low wail of a train that shouldn't exist. I've checked my phone recording silence, but I hear it as clearly as my own breath. The smell of coal lingers in my clothes, no matter how many times I wash them. And last night, in the bathroom mirror, I saw a smear across my chest, a faint punch mark burned into my skin in the shape of a ticket stub. I've stopped sleeping. Every shadow feels too heavy, every creak in the building like an approaching step. I tried to tell myself it was stress, lack of rest, imagination fueled by ghost stories. But tonight, as I sit here recording this, the walls tremble faintly, like distant wheels grinding along rails. The air is cold, sharp, carrying that familiar metallic tang. The whistle's closer now. They said those who hear it die within days. I thought it was just a story, a piece of folklore to scare off kids. But I can feel it inside me, like the train is pulling something vital out inch by inch. Every breath is harder, every heartbeat slower, as though my body is already boarding. I don't know if anyone will find this recording, or if it will vanish like my photographs. All I know is that when the whistle sounds tonight, I won't fight it. The conductor is waiting, and my ticket's already punched. The shadow train always takes who it wants, and this time, it wants me. They told me never to open the door after midnight in Salem. Not once. Not for anyone. I laughed the first time I heard that. I just moved into an old rental house on Essex Street, a colonial relic that leaned slightly to one side, its wood groaning whenever the coastal wind picked up. I thought the warning was just part of the town's tourist bait. Salem lives on its ghosts. But the landlord's eyes were flat when she said it, her hand still gripping the keys as if she didn't want to let go. "You'll hear it," she muttered. "One knock, always at midnight. Don't answer. My name is Daniel Morgan. I'm 34, a history teacher from Boston, renting the place for the summer while working on a book about the Salem witch trials. It seemed perfect cheap rent, atmospheric setting, within walking distance of archives and cemeteries. I arrived in late June, unpacked my books, and didn't think twice about the warning. The first night passed quietly. The house smelled of dust and pine cleaner, the air heavy with salt drifting in from the harbor. I worked late, surrounded by photocopies of trial transcripts, the ink smudging my fingers. At exactly midnight, the grandfather clock in the parlor chimed, and then came a sound that made my skin prickle. One knock. Not a rap of knuckles or the slam of a fist, but a single deliberate thud on the front door, like someone pressing their palm hard against the wood. The sound reverberated through the hall. I froze, pen in hand, waiting for a second knock that never came. After a long silence, I crept to the door, peered through the peephole. Nothing but fog swirling in the gaslight. I went to bed uneasy, telling myself it was kids playing pranks. But when I woke, the air downstairs smelled faintly wrong, acrid, like burnt meat. The second night, it happened again. Midnight chime and the solitary knock. This time I forced myself not to move, not to breathe loudly. But the smell seeped under the door faster, sharper, as if heat pressed against it. I swear the wood felt warm when I touched it, though the rest of the house was cool. By the third night, I was rattled. I asked a librarian at the Salem Athenaeum about my street. She glanced at me, then at the man shelving behind her, and said only, "Some houses keep memories longer than others." It wasn't the answer I wanted, but it was enough to plant the seed. I started digging, cross-referencing property records with execution sites. My stomach sank when I found a name. Rebecca Nurse's niece had once lived on this very plot, until she too was accused and vanished from records. Burned alive? Hung? No one agreed, but her absence screamed from the pages. That night, I told myself I wouldn't listen for it. I poured whiskey, tried to drown myself in grading essays I'd brought from Boston. Midnight came, and I held my breath. The knock shook the whole frame of the house. The glass in the windows rattled. I leapt from my chair, spilling whiskey, my pulse hammering. This wasn't kids. It wasn't the wind. It was heavy, intentional. Something wanted in. The scent followed quickly burnt flesh, sweet and rancid, wrapping the house in invisible smoke. I gagged, clutching my shirt to my face, and then came something worse. From the other side of the door, faint but undeniable, a woman's voice whispered my name. I didn't sleep that night. The days blurred. I tried to distract myself with work, but my eyes drifted constantly to the door, dreading nightfall. My appetite vanished. I lost track of time. Every creak in the old house sounded like footsteps on the porch. On the sixth night, my resolve cracked. Midnight came. The knock followed. The smell pressed against me, like heat waves. But the whisper changed this time. "Please, let me in." The voice was soft, pleading, nothing monstrous about it. It trembled like someone lost in a storm. My throat tightened. My hand shook as I reached for the knob. She sounded so human. I stopped an inch away, my mind racing. What if it was some local trying to frighten me? What if it wasn't? I forced myself back. I didn't open it. Not yet. But sleep never came. I lay in bed hearing faint scratches on the walls, as though fingers dragged slowly along the siding. The smell never left that night. I woke to it woven into my sheets, soaked into my hair. By the seventh night, I was unraveling. I told myself I'd prove it was nothing. I set up my phone camera facing the door, hit record, and sat in the parlor with every light on. Midnight. The clock chimed. The knock landed, shuddering through the wood. I jumped, though I expected it. The smell swelled. My stomach lurched. When I replayed the video later, my blood ran cold. At the stroke of midnight, the door warped. A frame seemed to bulge inward, like something pressed against it from outside. A dark smear appeared just below the peephole, shaped like a handprint. Fingers splayed. No person visible. Only that hand burning into the wood, leaving behind a blackened mark. The next day, I checked. The wood was charred where the print had been. I should have left. Packed my bags, driven back to Boston, never looked over my shoulder. But I didn't. Call it pride, call it obsession, but I needed to know. Last night, the 8th night, I broke. Midnight came. The knock rattled the glass, stronger than ever. The smell filled the air instantly, searing my lungs. My eyes watered, my skin prickled. "Daniel," the voice whispered, clearer than before. "It burns. Please." Something in me snapped. I yanked the deadbolt, flung the door wide, and no one stood there. Only fog, heavy, suffocating, reeking of char. It rolled into the house, swallowing the light. My chest seized. I stumbled back, coughing. In the fog, shapes moved, dark figures shifting, their outlines flickering like firelight. Faces stretched, mouths open in silent screams, their eyes burned hollow. I slammed the door shut, but the fog was already inside, coiling up the staircase, pressing against my skin like hot breath. I could hear them whispering all around me now. Dozens of voices overlapping, begging, accusing, chanting words I couldn't understand. The walls shook. The floor trembled. My vision swam, and then I felt a hand on my shoulder. The skin was wet, blistered, the grip searing hot. I turned, and for a fraction of a second, I saw her. A woman in tattered colonial dress, her skin blackened and split, her mouth opening wider than it should. The scream that came from her throat wasn't human. I don't remember how I ended up outside. I just remember running barefoot into the street, the night air freezing my sweat, the fog curling around me until I collapsed on the sidewalk. I've been staying in a hotel ever since. I haven't gone back for my things. But last night, in the safety of a bright, crowded place, I heard it again. One knock at my hotel door. And when I opened it, yes, I opened it, I swear the hallway smelled faintly of burning flesh. I was told never to sit on the swings in Centralia after midnight. People didn't say it as a joke, not like you'd warn a kid about Bloody Mary in a mirror. No, this came with a weight, with the kind of serious hush that makes you believe someone's tried it, and they never came back the same. I should have listened. God, I wish I had. My name's David Keene. I'm a freelance photographer, mostly abandoned places, industrial decay, forgotten ruins. That kind of work gets attention online, enough to keep me scraping by. And Centralia, Pennsylvania, it was always on my list. An entire town gutted by a fire burning underground since the 60s, streets split open with steam venting from the earth, whole neighborhoods reclaimed by trees. That's the kind of shot that lands on magazine covers, the kind of thing followers eat up. I got there on a cold November afternoon, the kind where the air smells faintly metallic, like snow isn't far off. The first thing I noticed was the silence. Not the peaceful kind you find in the woods, but the suffocating silence of a place people weren't supposed to be anymore. A highway dead-ended into spray-painted pavement, graffiti screaming in neon colors across cracked asphalt. My boots crunched over loose gravel as I carried my camera, and every step echoed too loud in that empty town. I had read about the playground before the rusted swings, the scorched merry-go-round, the slide twisted by heat from the fires below. Locals called it the silent playground, which sounded almost whimsical until I learned why. People said the swings moved on their own, slow creaks against the dead air, and sometimes if you stayed long enough, you'd hear children laughing. I told myself it was perfect atmosphere for my project, maybe even a stage night shoot with my tripod and long exposures. But deep down, I think I was curious in a way I shouldn't have been. I wanted to prove to myself the legends were nothing more than smoke in the wind. By sunset, the air grew bitter. The smell of sulfur clung to the back of my throat, faint but constant. Steam drifted from cracks in the pavement, curling around my legs as I walked. Every time the wind shifted, I felt like someone was exhaling warm breath against my neck. I reached the playground just as the last light bled from the horizon. It looked exactly how the blogs described it. The metal slide was warped and sagging, its surface blackened. The merry-go-round leaned to one side, one of its bars missing, and the swings, two of them still intact, hung from a rusting frame, chains stained dark. I pulled out my camera and started shooting, long shadows stretching across the scorched ground. But it wasn't long before I realized something was wrong. The air around the playground was colder than the rest of the town. I could see my breath billowing in thick clouds, even though the wind was still. And there was this faint sound. Not the wind, not animals, but the squeak of metal slowly rocking. I looked up from my camera. One of the swings was moving. Not much, just a lazy sway, as if a child had jumped off seconds ago. I stared, waiting for the wind to kick up, but it never came. My chest tightened. I tried to laugh it off, muttering to myself, old chains, probably just settling. But the longer I watched, the more unnatural it looked. The swing wasn't losing momentum, it was gaining it. Back and forth, higher each time, though nothing was pushing it. I should have left then. I should have grabbed my gear and run, but I didn't. Instead, I lifted my camera, hands trembling, and snapped a photo. The flash burst across the playground, and in that split second of light, I saw something sitting in the swing. A small figure, legs dangling, no face. Just a blur of shadow and the impression of eyes, too many eyes, all staring directly at me. I staggered back, the camera slipping from my grip and landing hard against the dirt. The swing slowed instantly, chains clinking into silence. My ears rang from the blood pounding in my head, and for a long minute I couldn't move. Then I heard it, children, laughing. It came faint, carried through the cold air. Dozens of voices, overlapping, high-pitched and hollow. My stomach twisted because it wasn't playful laughter. It was mocking, cruel. I scanned the playground. Flashlight beam darting over rust and ash, but there was nothing. No footprints, no figures, just that sound circling me, bouncing from every direction. Who's there? I called, my voice shaking. The laughter stopped instantly, cut off mid-breath. And in that sudden silence, something touched my hand. It was small, clammy, burning hot like skin pressed against the stove. Tiny fingers curled around mine, gripping tight. I yanked my hand back with a choked gasp, stumbling into the merry-go-round. The smell of sulfur was choking now, so thick I could taste it, bitter and sour. The swings began moving again. Not one, but both of them rocking in perfect unison. I backed away, but the ground beneath me felt wrong, soft, spongy, like the earth itself was breathing. Steam hissed from the cracks, and I thought I heard whispers rising with it. Words I couldn't understand, spoken in voices too small, too distorted. I don't remember deciding to sit down. That's the worst part. 1 second I was standing, the next I was lowering myself onto the left swing, my body moving without permission. The chain links were icy against my palms, but the seat burned like it had been left out under a blazing sun. I tried to get up, but my legs wouldn't respond. The air pressed heavy around me, and then I felt them. Hands, dozens of them, gripping mine, gripping my legs, wrapping around my arms. They were child-sized, but impossibly strong. My swing lurched forward. My body arched as if pushed from behind, and I screamed, the sound swallowed instantly by laughter erupting all around me. The swing pumped harder, higher, chains groaning in protest. I was weightless at the top, then slammed back down, chest rattling. The playground blurred, shadows streaking across my vision. I clenched my teeth and tried to wrench free, but the hands wouldn't let go. They wanted me to swing. They wanted me to join them. Then I saw their faces. All around me, in the steam, faces flickered into view, children. Dozens of them, with hollow eyes and mouths stretched too wide. their skin blistered, cracked, some peeling away like melted wax. They circled the playground, running where no ground existed, laughing in voices that weren't theirs anymore. And in each face, I caught flashes of something else adults, old and young, their features twisted into masks of terror. Faces I didn't recognize, but all of them screaming silently as if trapped inside. The swing jerked violently, throwing me back. I let out a cry as the chains snapped tight, and for a second, I thought they'd break, that I'd be flung into the sky. But then, as suddenly as it started, everything stopped. The swing froze mid-motion, and the hands let go. I collapsed to the dirt, chest heaving, palms raw from gripping the chains. The playground was still again. No laughter, no faces, just silence and the faint hiss of steam from the earth. I scrambled to my feet, grabbed my camera, and ran. I don't remember how I got back to my car. I don't remember the drive out of town. The next thing I recall clearly is waking up in my apartment the following morning, my clothes stinking of sulfur, my skin blistered with burns on both palms, shaped like small handprints. That was 3 weeks ago. Since then, I haven't slept more than an hour at a time. Every night, I hear it, the faint creak of chains, the soft patter of small feet across my floor. When I close my eyes, I feel hands gripping mine again, hot and relentless. And sometimes, when I pass by mirrors, I catch glimpses behind me. Children, dozens of them, standing in the reflection, but not in the room. Their faces change every time. Some are burned, some hollow, but last night, I swear, I saw my own face among them. I'm telling this because I don't know how much longer I'll last. Centralia's children are still there, waiting on those swings, and I think they've already chosen me. They say if you see the lantern, you've already gone too far. That was the warning an old man at the gas station gave me when I mentioned where I was headed. Don't stop on the bridge, he said, his cloudy eyes fixed on mine. And whatever you do, don't follow him. I laughed politely, but his words lodged in me like a splinter, festering until I couldn't stop scratching at the thought. My name is Daniel Hayes, 31 years old, freelance photographer, and like an idiot, I thought chasing small-town legends would make for a compelling side project. I was in Wisconsin on assignment, covering abandoned farmhouses and forgotten railroads for a magazine spread, when I heard whispers about Black River Falls, the town with a haunted reputation so thick even locals spoke of it with lowered voices. Of all its dark stories, one stuck with me, the Lantern Man. The legend was simple. At midnight, on the old bridges outside town, a figure with a lantern appears. He raises a skeletal hand and beckons travelers forward. If you step onto the bridge, the wood beneath you gives way, plunging you into black water that never ends, even if the river itself is dry. Most people laugh it off, another campfire tale in a town drowning in them. But there was something about it that gnawed at me. Maybe it was the way everyone gave the same small detail. The smell of wet rot, like a river that had been dead for centuries. So one night, with my camera slung around my neck and my notebook in my coat pocket, I drove down the cracked 2-lane road toward the river. The air was sharp with the bite of approaching winter, every breath cutting cold in my lungs. Trees closed in on either side, their bare branches clawing at the sky. When I reached the bridge, I killed the engine and let the silence press in. The bridge was nothing more than a weather-beaten skeleton of wood and rusting iron rails. The river beneath it was a trickle, barely wide enough to soak the stones littering its bed. Moonlight cast the whole place in washed-out gray, so still it felt wrong, like a photograph instead of reality. I checked my watch. 11:54. I set up near the edge, bracing my camera on the hood of the car. Every snap of the shutter seemed too loud. Time dragged. My breath fogged in the air, rising like smoke. And then, as the church bell in town began its slow midnight toll, I saw the light. It started as a faint glow at the far end of the bridge, pale and wavering, like fireflies trapped in glass. Then it grew brighter, sharper, until I could make out the shape, a lantern swinging slowly, rhythmically, as though carried by someone walking with deliberate purpose. My mouth went dry. The figure emerged from the shadows, tall, impossibly thin, draped in what looked like waterlogged rags that clung to its frame. The lantern dangled from one long arm, the flame inside guttering against the glass. And then it raised its other hand bare, skeletal, skin hanging in tatters from bone, and it beckoned. One slow curl of the finger. Come. I froze. Every instinct screamed at me to get back in the car, to drive until the road ran out, but my legs betrayed me. The camera clicked in my hands as if by its own will, capturing frame after frame of that impossible figure. I thought, stupidly, that maybe I'd prove the legend was real. But the camera betrayed me too. Each photo, when I glanced at the screen, showed nothing but empty bridge. No light, no figure, just darkness. The smell hit me then, damp, rotting, like old river mud mixed with decay. My stomach rolled. I wiped my sleeve across my mouth and stepped back, but the lantern swung closer. The figure didn't walk. Not really. It seemed to glide, each step too long, too smooth, as though the ground itself tilted it forward. The hand rose again, curling, insistent. And then the sound began. Not footsteps, not breathing. It was the groan of wood under pressure, the creak of planks bending where no weight should be. I glanced at the riverbed below dry stones, cracked mud. Still, I heard water lapping, restless, eager. Don't follow him. The warning returned, sharp as broken glass in my mind. I stumbled back toward the car, fumbling for the door handle. But when I looked up, the bridge stretched longer than before. It seemed endless now, swallowed by blackness at both ends. My car sat only feet behind me, but the distance felt wrong, stretched thin like melted taffy. My vision swam. The lantern flame flared, blinding. And then, impossibly, I was standing on the bridge. My boots pressed into damp wood that hadn't been damp a moment ago. The boards flexed beneath me, groaning as though something massive shifted below. My breath caught. I hadn't walked. I swear to God I hadn't walked. One moment I was at the roadside. The next I was halfway across. The figure just ahead, lantern swaying. He didn't beckon anymore. He didn't need to. The bridge itself carried me forward, every step unsteady, the planks tilting under my feet like a ship at sea. The smell of water thickened, choking, until my throat burned. My ears filled with the roar of a river in flood, though the bed below remained cracked and dry. I tried to turn back, but the way behind me was gone just blackness, deep and absolute. The figure's lantern carved the only path forward. I stumbled closer. The skeletal hand reached out, long fingers curling around the air. My skin prickled as though icy nails had scraped across it. The lantern's glow washed over his face, or what should have been a face. There was nothing but a hollow skull, empty sockets burning with dim, watery light. I screamed. The sound died before it left my mouth. The boards beneath me gave way, dropping in jagged splinters. I plunged into black water colder than death, the shock of it stealing every thought, every breath. The lantern's glow bobbed above me as I sank, the skeletal hand reaching down, closer, closer. I don't remember swimming. I don't remember breathing. I only remember waking up on the roadside at dawn, soaked to the bone, mud caked in my hair, my camera shattered beside me. The riverbed was dry again, the bridge as broken and harmless as before. I thought I'd survived, that somehow I'd escaped what others hadn't. But 3 nights later, I woke to the sound of water dripping in my apartment. There were wet footprints on the floor, leading from the door to my bed. Last night, I heard it again, the groan of wood, the creak of planks bending, though I live 3 stories up. And tonight, as I sit here writing this, I can smell it. The rot of the river, heavy and inescapable. My hands are shaking, but I have to finish. If you ever see the lantern, don't follow. Don't even look too long, because once he's marked you, the bridge comes for you no matter where you are. And I think when the clock strikes 12 tonight, the boards will finally give way for me. I was warned never to follow the bell. The old bartender in Bridgeport leaned across the counter, his voice low and rough, as if the words themselves carried weight. If you hear it, don't move a damn inch, not 1 step. Midnight in Bodie isn't for the living. I laughed it off at the time, thinking it was just another local legend to spook tourists like me. But now, sitting here writing this hands shaking, eyes burning from sleepless nights, I can still hear that echo. It rings inside me like my own bones are the bell. My name is Daniel Price. I'm 32, a freelance travel writer, though lately, most of my assignments involve so-called haunted places of America. It's a growing niche, one that pays the bills and feeds the algorithms. Bodie, California, was supposed to be just another ghost town in a long line of ghost towns, an old mining settlement turned historic site, abandoned after the gold dried up. A place where I could snap some eerie photos, jot down a few notes about creaking wood and rusting signs, and drive home with a story. I had no idea that what I would bring back with me wouldn't be words or pictures, but something that clung to me like frost on a corpse. I arrived in Bodie in late October, right before the park closed for the season. The air was already sharp with winter's edge, the sky a dull slate that promised snow. The ghost town was quiet, only a handful of scattered tourists wandering the dirt streets between the preserved buildings. Wooden storefronts leaned with age, their windows blank like dead eyes. The church, though, caught my attention immediately. Its wooden steeple still stood tall, sharp against the dimming sky. That's when I first heard someone mention it. A park ranger, giving a half-hearted history tour to a group of retirees, gestured toward the chapel. The church bell hasn't existed for over 100 years, burned in a fire that gutted half the town. But some folks claim they still hear it ring just once when the clock strikes midnight. The group chuckled nervously, as if they were in on a joke, but my chest tightened. I thought of the bartender's warning, the way his eyes refused to meet mine when he told me not to follow. That night, I stayed in my car just outside town. The highway was too far, and I wanted to be close enough to hear the silence of Bodie at night. Around 11, the cold had already sunk deep into my bones. My breath fogged the windshield as I huddled inside my sleeping bag, staring through the glass at the silhouette of the ghost town against the moonlit hills. Every creak of cooling metal, every gust of wind across the sagebrush made my skin crawl. By 11:50, I was wide awake, heart pounding with anticipation I didn't want to admit to myself. And then, at exactly midnight, it came. One low, resonant toll, heavy and hollow, as if it rolled out from the earth itself. My teeth vibrated in my skull. The sound wasn't coming from the town, not really. It was everywhere at once, inside me, above me, behind me. My first instinct was to stay put, remember the warning. But curiosity is a vicious thing. Before I realized it, I had unzipped my bag, pushed open the car door, and stepped into the night. The air was colder than before, the kind of cold that gnaws into your marrow. The dirt beneath my boots crunched like breaking bones. The town was silent, suffocatingly so, and yet I heard something that shouldn't have been there. Footsteps. Dozens of them. Soft, measured, in rhythm, moving in the same direction I was facing the church. But the street was empty. My breath quickened as I walked forward, drawn like a moth. The wooden buildings loomed on either side, their windows reflecting faint slivers of moonlight. The closer I got, the more distinct the sounds became: shoes scuffing, skirts rustling, the murmur of low voices. My chest tightened. It was as if I was walking in the middle of a congregation I couldn't see. The church door stood ajar, swaying slightly, though the night air was still. I hesitated, every nerve screaming at me to turn back, but something pushed me forward. I stepped inside. The interior smelled of rot and dust. The pews were coated in a fine layer of gray, untouched for decades. But the sound was alive. Shuffling feet, creaking wood, the sigh of bodies settling into seats. I swear I felt the brush of fabric against my arm, as if someone had walked past me to sit down. My skin erupted in gooseflesh. Then I heard the pulpit creak. The air grew heavier, thicker, pressing down on my lungs. A shape shifted in the shadows at the front of the chapel. I couldn't make out its features, just the faint outline of a figure standing tall, head bowed, hands gripping something. A Bible? No, not a Bible. I blinked, and for a moment I thought it was holding a rope, frayed and blackened, like it had been pulled from fire. The toll came again, sharper this time, reverberating inside the chapel. I clamped my hands over my ears, but it didn't help. The sound was in my head, behind my eyes. My vision blurred, spots dancing across the darkness. And then I realized the congregation, the invisible audience, was rising to their feet. I could hear it, the scrape of benches, the synchronized exhale of dozens of chests. My heart hammered against my ribs. I stumbled backward, but the doorway seemed impossibly far, the aisle stretching longer and longer with each step. Shadows pooled around my ankles, rising like water. I tried to scream, but my throat locked tight. Then they touched me. Cold hands, dozens of them, brushing against my arms, my shoulders, tugging at my clothes. Fingertips grazed the back of my neck, icy and sharp. A whisper crawled into my ear, a voice I didn't recognize, but somehow understood. "Stay. Service has begun." I broke then. Adrenaline surged through me, and I shoved past the unseen bodies, stumbling toward the light spilling from the open doors. The church seemed to resist me, its walls bending inward, the air thick like syrup. But I ran, legs burning, lungs screaming, until I burst outside into the night. The town was no longer silent. The footsteps followed me, echoing on every side street, closing in. I sprinted back toward my car, the cold biting at my face, the bell tolling again and again, though it was only supposed to ring once. By the time I slammed the door shut and twisted the key, the sound was deafening. My headlights flickered, the engine stuttered, but somehow the car roared to life. I drove until Bodie was nothing but a shadow in my rearview mirror. I should have left it there. I should have buried the memory with all the other ghost stories I've chased. But the bell won't let me. Every night since, no matter where I am, cheap motel, family home, crowded city apartment, I hear it. That single heavy toll at midnight. And with it, the footsteps, faint at first, then closer, closer still. Last night, I swear I heard the pews creak behind me as I sat at my desk. And when I turned, I caught a glimpse of dust swirling in the air, like bodies shifting in their seats, waiting for me to begin. I don't know how much longer I can hold out. The congregation wants me back. The service was never finished. And tonight, as the clock ticks closer to midnight, I know the bell will toll again. And this time, I don't think I'll be able to resist. They told me never to touch the tears. That was the only rule. No matter what you saw, no matter how real the blood looked dripping down her cheeks, keep your hands away from the statue. I laughed when I first heard it, the way people laugh when they're trying to push back unease. I don't laugh anymore. My name is Aaron Collins, 34 years old, history teacher, Sleepy Hollow High. I've always been fascinated with the lore that lingers in this town like mist over the Hudson. The headless horseman gets all the attention, but the cemetery behind the old Dutch church holds darker whispers, the kind that don't make it into children's storybooks. I was researching for a class project on local legends when I first heard about the statue. They said it wept blood at midnight, and if you touched those tears, the statue claimed you forever. It sounded perfect for Halloween lectures, a little thrill for the students. So one late October evening, after a football game and too much cheap coffee, I drove down to the churchyard with my notebook and camera, determined to see for myself. The cemetery gates were open, just enough for me to slip through. The air carried that heavy autumn chill, sharp with the scent of fallen leaves and faint wood smoke from distant houses. The moon was a white coin behind drifting clouds, just enough to paint the gravestones in shades of silver and black. I moved quietly, every crunch of gravel under my shoes echoing far too loud. I found her near the back, half hidden by leaning oaks whose roots twisted like grasping fingers. The statue was taller than I expected, nearly 7 feet, carved in pale stone that had weathered to a ghostly gray. It was a woman in mourning robes, hands clasped, head bowed slightly, eyes hollow and dark. The folds of her gown seemed almost too real, as though they might ripple if a breeze stirred. But what held me were her eyes carved to follow, no matter where I shifted. I checked my watch. 11:57. I leaned against a cracked monument and waited, breath fogging in the cold. At first, nothing happened. The cemetery was silent, except for the occasional rustle of dry leaves. Then, just as the church bell began tolling 12, I saw it. A dark line shimmered beneath the statue's right eye, trailing down the cheek. Another followed, from the left. The liquid was thick, glistening, too dark to be rainwater, too heavy to be dew. It caught the moonlight with a dull red sheen. Blood. My heart slammed in my chest. I raised my camera, snapping photo after photo, but every picture showed only dry stone. No tears, no blood, just blank, empty eyes. When I lowered the camera, the tears were flowing freely, dripping onto the statue's folded hands before vanishing into the stone. My stomach twisted. This was no trick of weather or shadow. It was happening. And then, I swear, I felt her gaze sharpen. Not the vague illusion of carved eyes following me. No, this was direct, heavy, penetrating. My skin prickled as though cold fingers had brushed my neck. A whisper seemed to slither through the air, though no mouth moved. "Why do you watch?" I staggered back, nearly tripping over a broken headstone. My breath came fast, clouding the air. I told myself it was fatigue, over-caffeination, suggestion fueled by legend. I should have left then. I should have turned and walked straight to my car. But I stayed. Some part of me wanted proof, more than photographs that showed nothing. Against every ounce of sense, I reached out. My fingers hovered just inches from the damp track glistening down her cheek. The air was colder there, biting my skin like frost. The smell hit me iron, sharp and unmistakable. Blood. And then I touched it. The liquid was warm. Too warm, like a living pulse. My fingertips tingled, then burned, as though the stone itself had fused to my skin. I jerked my hand back, gasping, but the warmth didn't fade. It spread up my arm, into my chest, coiling around my heart. I doubled over, nausea rolling through me. The world tilted, and when I looked up, the statue's face had changed. It wasn't her anymore. It was mine. My own features stared back, carved in stone, eyes hollow, mouth frozen in grief. Blood streamed down my likeness's cheeks. My stomach lurched, bile rising. I stumbled away, heart racing, but every direction I turned, the statue followed. Its head moved slow, grinding stone on stone, always turned to face me. I ran then, tearing across the graveyard, scraping my hands on rough stone as I climbed through the gate. The night air outside was thick with the coppery scent of blood, though no one was near. When I reached my car, I locked the doors and sobbed, shaking until dawn broke. I told myself I'd imagined it, that exhaustion and fear had twisted shadows into visions. But the proof was waiting when I got home. In the bathroom mirror, faint red streaks ran down my cheeks from the corners of my eyes. Not scratches, not makeup blood. I scrub it until my skin burned raw, but the stains remained faint and accusing. Every night since, I've dreamed of the statue. I see myself frozen in stone, weeping endlessly as faceless strangers shuffle past and whisper my name. I wake with the taste of iron on my tongue and the weight of unseen eyes pressing down. And during the day, reflections betray me. In store windows, in puddles, in my own mirror, I don't always see my face. Sometimes I see hers. I haven't told anyone. Who would believe me? A teacher dabbling in ghost stories who got spooked in a cemetery. But I feel it growing stronger. The warmth I felt that night is still inside me, spreading deeper, rooting in bone. At odd moments, I feel my expression shift without my control, my features slackening into grief I don't feel. Tonight is the 7th night since I touched the tears. And tonight, when I looked in the mirror, it wasn't me at all. It was her, the weeping woman, her eyes hollow, her face carved and unyielding. Blood dripped from her cheeks, staining the sink. When I blinked, she blinked. I think the legend was wrong. It doesn't wait until you die. It starts replacing you while you're still alive. And I don't know how much of me is left. They told me not to stay in Rugby after dark. Not because of wild animals or vagrants, but because of the church. Everyone in Morgan County knows the story. When the clock strikes midnight, the old stone chapel howls. Not just a moan of the wind through broken glass, not creaks of rotting wood animal howls, deep and guttural, like a pack circling prey. And if you linger, the voices grow closer, until the air on your neck feels damp with breath that isn't yours. My name's Aaron Tate. I'm 31, a history grad student at the University of Tennessee. I'd been writing my thesis on failed utopian communities and Rugby, Tennessee, founded by British idealists in the late 1800s and abandoned not long after, was a perfect case study. I didn't go there chasing ghost stories. I went for research. I had permission to photograph what remained of the colony, especially the Christ Church, still standing though scarred by time. I wasn't thinking about legends. I just wanted good shots for my paper. I arrived in late October when the woods were bare and the light died early. Rugby sits in the Cumberland Plateau, surrounded by ridges that swallow radio signals and trap fog like a coffin lid. I set up a room at the historic Newberry House, one of the few restored buildings in town, and spent the afternoon photographing stone foundations, crooked fences, and the hollow shells of cottages where moss grew through cracks in the floor. Locals I met were polite but brief. When I asked about the church, most just muttered, "Don't go at night." By dusk, I was still restless. I convinced myself the warnings were just superstition, a tourist hook to keep the ghost tour alive. I'd shot plenty of old churches before. None of them howled. So after dinner, armed with my Nikon, a flashlight, and a thermos of coffee, I walked down Rugby Parkway and into the fog that pooled like smoke between the skeletal trees. The church was easy to spot. Its stone walls loomed against the pale moonlight, weathered but solid, with stained glass windows fractured like frozen lightning. The air around it was colder than the rest of the night, sharp enough to sting my throat. My boots crunched the gravel path, echoing too loudly, like the sound was swallowed and spat back at me. Inside, the pews were still intact though warped, their varnish flaking like old skin. Dust coated everything, disturbed only by raccoon tracks near the altar. My flashlight beam caught the crucifix still hanging, crooked from the wall. Christ's carved face was eroded, more skull than savior. I set up my tripod, checking exposures, trying to ignore the gnawing in my gut that told me I was intruding. The air was thick, heavy, the kind of stillness you feel in abandoned hospitals or graveyards, like the walls are listening. By 11:30, I'd finished most of my shots, but I lingered, scribbling notes. I told myself I'd wait until midnight, just to prove to myself nothing would happen. That decision ruined me. It began as a vibration, so faint I thought it was my imagination. A hum under my boots, like a train passing somewhere far off. Then, from deep inside the stone, came a groan long, low, animalistic. My breath caught. The sound wasn't outside. It was in the church, as if the walls themselves were exhaling. Then the first howl ripped through the nave. It wasn't wind. It was guttural, layered, a dozen voices snarling in unison. The stained glass rattled violently, shards falling like icy rain onto the pews. My flashlight flickered. My skin crawled as if invisible insects swarmed beneath it. I should have left then. God help me, I should have run. But my legs locked. The howls didn't fade. They multiplied, overlapping, a cacophony circling me from all directions. Some were wolf-like, others more human, strangled screams twisted into animal noise. I swung the light frantically, expecting raccoons, a bear, anything living. The beam caught only dust, pews, and shadows that seemed to crawl when I wasn't looking directly at them. The air shifted, carrying with it the rank stench of wet fur and rot. My throat tightened. Every instinct screamed that I wasn't alone. Then I felt it warmth against the back of my neck. Not air, not wind, breath. I spun, the flashlight beam slicing through emptiness. But the pew behind me was indented, as though something unseen pressed its weight into the wood. The groan of old timber echoed like it was straining under a body too heavy. My stomach lurched. I backed toward the door, snapping my camera in desperation, the shutter clicking like frantic footsteps. Each flash lit the church in stark frames. First frame, empty pews. Second frame, something hunched between the aisles, blurred, too tall for a man, too misshapen for an animal. Third frame, nothing again. My breath came in short, sharp bursts. The howls grew shrill, closer, until it felt like they came from just beyond my skin. My vision tunneled. The crucifix rattled against the wall, the wood splintering. I bolted for the doors, but when I pulled, they resisted, as if held from the other side. My heart slammed in my chest, my palms slick with sweat on the iron handles. Behind me, the pews creaked one by one, as if a congregation of unseen beasts rose to their feet. I screamed, shoving with everything I had, and the doors burst open. Cold air hit me like a wave. I stumbled into the fog, nearly falling to my knees, but the howls followed. They poured from the church, rolling across the graveyard like thunder. And then they changed. They began to echo from the woods, from the fog, from all around me. I ran, my lungs burned, my boots slipping on wet leaves, branches clawing at my jacket. Every few steps I felt it again, breath at my neck, too close, moist and steady, though nothing was there when I looked. The sound of claws scratching stone chased me, then shifted to claws on gravel, then claws on leaves. Always behind me, always just behind. By the time I reached the Newberry house, I was sobbing, fumbling my keys. Inside, I locked the door, every muscle trembling. The howls had stopped. Silence pressed in, broken only by the ragged saw of my breath. I told myself I imagined it, that the isolation, the fog, the stories had gotten into my head. But when I developed the camera's memory card the next day, my blood turned to ice. Frame after frame of pews, empty pews. Then, in the middle of the sequence, one image that should not exist. A congregation filling every seat, faces contorted, half human, half beast, their eyes glowing with a pale, feral light. Their mouths were open in unison, howling. And in the aisle, closest to the lens, was a figure crouched low, its head tilted at an impossible angle, mouth stretched too wide, teeth like broken glass. I deleted the file, burned the backup, but it doesn't matter. I hear them still. Some nights, right as the clock hits 12, a low groan shakes the walls of my apartment in Knoxville. My windows rattle like stained glass. And last night, I woke to warmth against my neck, the slow, damp exhale of something just behind me. I turned on every light, but of course, nothing was there. I don't think the church kept them. I think they followed me. So if you ever find yourself in Rugby, if you ever feel tempted to test the legend, don't. Leave before the clock strikes 12. Don't linger, not even a minute. Because once you hear them, once they breathe against your neck, they never let you go. I should have listened when the old bartender at Chet's Tap warned me never to drive Archer Avenue after midnight. He leaned in close, the sour smell of beer heavy on his breath, and muttered, "If you see her, don't stop. Don't even slow down. Just keep your eyes forward and your foot on the gas." I laughed it off at the time. I wasn't the superstitious type, and besides, I had driven every kind of road in Illinois snow-slick highways, desolate cornfield backroads, even stretches where deer darted out like suicidal shadows. But nothing prepared me for what I experienced that night outside Chicago when I made the mistake of ignoring his warning. My name's Daniel, though most folks just call me Dan. I'm 34, a freelance photographer who makes most of his money shooting weddings and the occasional magazine piece. That night in late October, I was heading home from an assignment in Joliet. It was a reception that dragged longer than planned, leaving me exhausted and restless. I had two options: the long highway loop back to my apartment in Oak Lawn, or the quicker, darker cut through Archer Avenue. Against my better judgment and maybe out of arrogance, I chose Archer. It was almost 12:30 a.m. The road empty, the world smothered in fog that seemed to rise straight from the damp soil of Resurrection Cemetery itself. The first thing that struck me was how the headlights seemed swallowed whole by the mist. Trees pressed close on either side of the road, their skeletal branches rattling faintly in the cold autumn wind. I turned off the radio after the static grew unbearable and tried to focus on the lines of the pavement, but my eyelids were heavy and the silence crept under my skin. That's when I saw her. She appeared just beyond the halo of my high beams, standing at the shoulder as if she'd been waiting. A young woman, slender, dressed in white that shimmered oddly in the fog. Her hair was dark, long, and her skin pale enough to catch the moonlight through the shifting mist. She raised one hand slow, almost hesitant, and for reasons I can't explain, I pulled over. When she slipped into the passenger seat, I felt the air temperature drop sharply. My breath fogged the windshield, though the heater was on. She spoke softly, her voice thin and almost melodic. "Can you give me a ride home?" I nodded, trying to mask the prickle running along the back of my neck. Up close, she looked no older than 20, maybe even younger. Her dress wasn't just white, it looked like something from another era, the kind of satin gown brides wore in black and white photos. She gave me an address without hesitation, and my stomach sank as soon as she said it. Right near Resurrection Cemetery. For the first few minutes, neither of us spoke. The tires hummed against the asphalt, fog swirling like smoke around us. But I couldn't shake the feeling of wrongness, the way her presence pressed against the edges of my nerves. She sat perfectly still, her hands folded neatly in her lap, her eyes fixed straight ahead. Not once did she glance at me, not even when I tried to make small talk. Her skin had that waxy pallor I've only ever seen on the dead, and when the faint beam of a passing streetlight touched her face, I swore I saw the gleam of moisture at the corner of her eye, not tears, but something colder, like condensation forming on glass. The silence grew unbearable. Finally, I forced a chuckle and said, "So, coming from a party or something?" Her head turned slowly, almost mechanically, until her gaze locked with mine. Her lips parted as if to answer, but instead of words, a faint sound escaped like the faint click of heels echoing on a church floor. Then she looked forward again, expression frozen. My hands tightened on the wheel. We were nearing the gates of Resurrection Cemetery now, the towering wrought iron barely visible through the rolling mist. My chest tightened with each yard we drew closer. I didn't know why, but I felt like I was driving straight into something ancient, something watching. My headlights caught movement in the fog, and my pulse spiked footsteps. Clear, deliberate footsteps, though no one was visible on the road. They seemed to fall in rhythm with the car's speed, as if invisible figures walked alongside us, keeping pace. I swallowed hard and tried to shake it off, but then the sound shifted, from outside to inside, from the road to the back seat. The steady click of footsteps was now directly behind my headrest, in the space that should have been empty. I jerked my eyes to the rearview mirror. At first, I saw nothing, just fog pressing against the glass. But then, faintly, I noticed shapes, shadows like rows of figures seated quietly in a pew, their heads bowed, their outlines trembling in the light. My throat went dry. I twisted toward the passenger seat for some kind of explanation, but she was gone. The seat was empty. My knuckles whitened around the steering wheel. I hadn't heard the door open, hadn't felt the shift of weight when she left. She had simply vanished. The temperature plunged even lower, frost crackling across the inside of the windshield. And then I heard the faint sound of a girl's voice right by my ear. Almost home. The steering wheel yanked hard left, though my hands gripped it tight. The car swerved toward the cemetery gates. I slammed my foot on the brake, tires screeching against the damp asphalt. The world tilted in a blur of fog and iron bars, and for one terrible second, I thought I would crash straight through. But the car stopped dead, inches from the gates. My chest heaved, my heart pounding against my ribs like it wanted out. Silence, nothing but the rasp of my breath. Slowly, I turned my head. She was outside the car now, standing just beyond the gates, her face pale and sorrowful. Her hand lifted once more, but not in greeting this time, in farewell. Behind her, in the shifting mist of the cemetery, I saw the outlines of countless others, all watching me with hollow eyes. Parishioners waiting for their eternal ride. I blinked, and she was gone. They were all gone. Only fog remained, swirling like smoke from extinguished candles. I didn't wait. I slammed the car into reverse and tore down Archer Avenue, my tires spitting gravel, my chest burning with each breath. I didn't stop driving until I was back in the lights of Oak Lawn, trembling so hard I could barely pull the key from the ignition. That was 3 weeks ago. I've barely slept since. Every night, just as I close my eyes, I hear it again, the faint click of heels on pavement, drawing closer and closer until they stop just behind me. I don't know if she's still out there, waiting for another driver foolish enough to stop, or if I brought her with me, locked inside my shadow. But if you ever find yourself on Archer Avenue after midnight, heed my warning. If you see her standing there, don't stop. Don't look at her. Don't even slow down. Because once she's inside your car, she's never truly gone. And if you hear footsteps tonight when you're alone, whatever you do, don't turn around.